Welcome to the Active Marketer Podcast, where we talk about how to design, automate, and scale your business to the next level using sales and marketing automation. You can find out all the tips, tactics, and techniques you need to get more customers and sell more stuff over at theactivemarketer.com. Now, here's your host, Barry Moore.
I'm going to use this in the blooper bit at the end.
Right.
I had one job, press the button. That's all. That was it.
Barry, how many buttons do you push on the planes, man?
All right, I'm excited to welcome back longtime friend of the show and the godfather of marketing automation, Mr. Chris L. Davis. How are you, brother?
Oh, Barry, I am so ready. Thank you for having me. Always.
You should be ready because this is about the fourth time we tried to record this.
Right. I am ready.
Oh, we're just having too much fun chatting. And yeah, I was the bonehead that forgot to hit the record button. So we are starting this again, which is why we're giggling our silly little heads off. But I'm excited to have Chris back. It's always great to talk marketing automation and just strategy in general with Chris. And if you're listening to this podcast in the distant future, we are in the midst of the coronavirus zombie apocalypse lockdown at the moment. And just about everyone's being challenged in one form or another, whether they've, lost customers or worse yet, lost their job. And kind of seeing two camps out there, the panic camp, where people are clutching their pearls and wringing their hands, and the pivot camp, where people are seeing the opportunities that are out there and pivoting their business or starting some new ones. So chaos always brings with it opportunity. I prefer to look where the opportunities are, and I'm sure most of you do as well. So you might be in the position where you need to either pivot your business, or you need to up the revenue of your business, or maybe you need to start a new business because you've lost your job, or you've seen the vulnerability of being an employee and depending on someone else for all your income from one single source. So Chris and I wanted to get together and talk about strategy and how you can get started in all those things, how you can get started pivoting your business, how you can get started upping your side hustle, or how you can get started just building a new business from scratch. So you would never just run to the hardware store, grab a bunch of timber and start building something without having a blueprint. So today we're going to talk about the blueprint a little bit, and nobody better to talk to about strategy and automation strategy in particular than Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
Man, Barry, this is therapeutic for me, mainly because it's an opportunity to give value. And the reason why it means so much is not just because it's with you. It's because, I've been on both sides of this spectrum and have had two totally different responses. I lost my job as an engineer about 8 years ago, maybe 10. I lost count. And was thrown into immediate despair. A lot of people believe that know me well. They think that I was born with a computer in my hand, computing logic and all of this stuff. But there was a point in time, Barry, I did not know about any of this business internet stuff. Like the world existed and I did not exist in it. Everything was happening and I was unaware. So when I lost my job, I was like, with 3 mouths to feed and 4 mouths to feed, a wife and 3 kids, I was just like, it was the most depressing time. I didn't know how to pivot. I didn't know how to make the adjustments. I wasn't positioned to be able to transition. And it was a very dark time. And I didn't. I can't say I pivoted. I panicked and, I got depressed and all of that. And then you fast forward it to more recently, I had the opportunity to lose my job. And then I was positioned to pivot. Right. So I was able to take advantage of the work that I had done prior, all of the bricks and foundation that I had laid in my business as a thought leader, influencer, and just an expert in the space of marketing automation. So now when I see people panic, I'm empathetic. When I see them pivot, I'm empathetic. And today I feel like we're going to have a mix of listeners. So just know I am speaking from both of those areas. What does it take to never have to panic again? right? And forever be able to pivot quickly to whatever the market does. That's the angle, that's the perspective that all of my training comes from.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see. I mean, I've been in positions in the past where I've been made redundant, and it feels like a kick in the guts or a punch in the face. And it's you can either reel from that and lay down on the mat, or you can put your hands up and start swinging. So, we're here to help you try and have the tools to start swinging. And it's been really interesting watching the reactions of different businesses and different people as well. And it's been really encouraging because there's been those businesses that almost immediately started to pivot. Like restaurants go to takeaway, and I saw this story where the strip clubs have been closed down, and now the strippers have gone to the restaurants to do the deliveries for the restaurants. Right? Like it's. There's people who have survival skills and people who don't, but and a really interesting one. A former guest on the show, Dan Norris, who used to run a company called WP Curve, which was a WordPress services business, and he since had sold that years ago, and then started a brewery here in Queensland with some friends of his, and that business has been devastated by all the shutdowns. So there's no restaurants, no cafes, no pubs getting their product. So he just put a post in one of his Facebook groups about how he had another group called the 7-Day Startup, where he was teaching people how to do startups. And he has a book called the 7-Day Startup, which is quite good if you're, ties in with what we're talking about today, how to get up and running and pivot quickly. So he put together a little mobile website, turned it into an app where people can order their beer directly from their brewery. All their sales reps are out on the road, who are out of a job now. They've turned into delivery people, and within like the first 48 hours, they've done like 5,000 business of direct brewery to home delivery.
Wow.
So it's really cool to see people just go right, pull up the bootstraps, pivot, and look for the opportunity in the chaos. So it's refreshing to see, beautiful. And we want to help you, the listener, try and do that as well.
Yeah.
So, as we said, it really pays to invest in having a blueprint first. You would never hire a builder who just comes and starts building a house for you without having a blueprint. It's a ridiculous proposition, but I see so many people do that with their business. They grab a tool like ActiveCampaign or Infusionsoft or whatever, they crack it open, and they start building automations, and they're excited and hooking up payment carts and stuff like that. And, it's like, ho, slow down. Like, what are we building here? And, and then even worse, you go back 6 months later and none of it makes any sense anymore because there was never in a blueprint to begin with.
Yeah.
So Chris, I know you do a lot of this kind of work with a lot of people, that really kind of the nucleus of the business or coming in and really putting a magnifying glass on the processes in the business and setting up the strategy for people. So if people are looking to pivot, or they're looking to review their business, or they're looking to start a brand new one, what's your advice? Where's the first place to start?
Yeah. And usually what happens is, as they're making this pivot, it's done under the advice of like a coach that they're working with, or an influencer, or somebody that's telling them, which leads them to some technology. They're like, hey, my coach told me to get this autoresponder. My coach told me to get these landing page software, this and that. Help me get this thing going in XYZ. And when I say this, everybody listening, the technology has leveled the playing field. So I have seen no difference, Barry, in smaller enterprises making 55 million annually, and the small business making 5,000 monthly, 60K annually, in the maturity and sustainability of systems in place. Like, both businesses, although revenue is extremely different, both seriously lack strong systems, right? So I don't trust anybody, Barry. I don't look at anybody's balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and say, okay, well, you must know what you're talking about. Experience has told me everybody has blind spots, especially in the process of extracting a strategy so that you can build a system around it to execute it automatically, right? So the first thing I do, Barry, is I look at their computer screen, or I listen to them talk about all of these tools, and I turn it off.
Yes.
So close the computer, I log them out and say, well, I'm glad that you know how to buy software. Checkbox.
Check.
We know, right? You figured that out. you won't need that skill for this exercise. And what I'm trying to do is what I alluded to earlier is I need to extract your strategy. Now, here's where mature, or I should say more traditional businesses really outshine online businesses. And a lot of people think it's the other way around. But when I sit down with a traditional business owner and I just start asking them questions, hey, how are you attracting uh how are you creating question marks and attracting those question marks to what you have to offer? Right? Like how are you raising that? What is that? Who does that? Right? And then coming to you, and then when they do come to you, how are you capturing their information? Once you capture their information, how do you follow up with them? Right? And once you follow up with them, where are you taking them? Like what is the sales event? How does the transaction take place? And then once they're at the sales event, how are you closing? All right? Is it in
Right.
person? Is it online? Is it, whatever? And then after you've closed and they've converted over to a customer, how are you delivering? And essentially, Barry, I'm walking them through the fundamental 5 systems. I teach on this in my masterclass, but I'm walking them through those fundamental 5 systems, and the answers to those questions now begin to start outlaying the strategy. Even if they've never seen their strategy in one collective place, they now have a start to it. And I can start to poke and prod at it, right? Poke holes and start to really dig in deeper and say, okay, so you said you're generating traffic from YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Which one is generating the highest quality lead? Oh, well, all of it. We did no. It can't be all of it. There's one.
Yeah.
The data,
Yeah.
all sources are not equal. So I like to walk through that process, just going through the foundational systems because they exist in every business and the answers to them. So if you're in a traditional business, like a service-based business, these processes like the back of your head. And I love it because they can just sit down and it's almost like therapy. I'm like the therapist with a notebook, and they're like the client on the couch with their feet up. Well,
Yeah.
once they come to our website, this is what we do, and da, 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 and I'm just documenting it all. That is the absolute first step before I do anything, and it's absolutely required.
Yeah, for sure. And not just required once, it's something that should happen periodically. If you've been if you go into an
Yes.
existing business that's been running for a while and you start extracting, it's like, okay, yeah, at this point with the customer, we do this step and then we do this step and then we do this step. And it's like, well, why are we doing that? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And a lot of the time the answer is like, oh, we've just always done that. And it's like, yeah.
Yes.
And it may be that the reason they were doing step X was no longer exists. The
Yeah.
technologies change or the customers change or the products change. And you don't even need to do that anymore. So yeah, if you're going to do this, think about, if you have an established business or an established process, you absolutely document all those 5 steps that we talked about. How do you gain interest? How do you capture interest? How do you follow up with people who are interested? How do you get them to show up for your sales event?
Yeah.
And then, what was the last one?
Convert and then deliver.
Yeah, how do you convert and deliver? So, but if you don't have any of that in place, you're trying to come up with a new business model or trying to come up with a new
Mhm.
business. Uh, you can kind of extract that by thinking about the customer journey. Right, the customer journey is always you trying to take a customer from one point to another point that they
Yeah.
desire to get. They desire to get to. Right, so
Yep.
easiest ones to think about is like maybe a fitness center or a gym. Someone's coming in flabby and out of shape. The result that they want is to be fit and look good. And so how do we get them from point A to B? And how do we get them to trust us that we're the ones that take them on that journey, right?
Yeah.
So once you get that customer journey in place, then those 5 fundamentals that Chris talked about, you can start to extract that stuff out of the customer journey if there isn't a predefined one already.
Yeah.
So, what tools are you using for this, Chris? How are we extracting and documenting all this stuff?
Yeah, because what's interesting about the customer journey that I always have to let people know is that, product market fit is the willingness for someone to even go on your journey.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure.
Like you could have the most beautiful journey laid out and planned out and say, oh my gosh, look at this thing. It's beautiful. But if there's no product market fit there, which means what you're offering does not solve an immediate need, an immediate pain, right? then they'll never buy the ticket to get on that journey. So it really begins with that, right? So whenever I'm thinking of, creating this journey, I have to make sure, say, hey, tell me about your product. And if they can't describe the benefits of their product, within a 30 seconds or so, like if I can't get it, if it takes them 30 minutes to tell me all of the great things that this product can do, and then I ask them who it's for, and they're like, everybody.
Yeah.
Like, look, the journey doesn't matter.
Unless it's toilet paper, it's not for everybody.
All right. Toilet paper right now. Right now is an immediate need.
That's right.
So and I'm glad you brought that up too, Barry, because market shifts, right? So it's market shifts play a role into the product market fit, just being in tune with what's going on. So everything with the coronavirus has really shifted the world. Now things that weren't as tight of a product market fit are. So that's your job, as the CEO of your business, is to always have a pulse on the product market fit, where the market is going and where you need to shift your product. And when you have that, you're ready, right? So let's do our checkbox, right? We've turned off the technology. We've sat down and we pulled out some tools to do some mapping, right? So you're asking questions, and somehow you're collecting the answers to those questions. For me, it's a Moleskin or a whiteboard. Some people like to do it right into the app. I would never.
No. Yeah.
I bet you between the both of us, Barry, we probably have enough Moleskins to fill up like a good library shelf or two.
Absolutely. Moleskin for the win, brother. I didn't go anywhere without that.
Oh man, I feel naked. I really do. I can leave my house and leave my wallet and get to my destination and be like, dang it, I forgot my wallet. Let me leave without my Moleskin. And I'm like, I don't get down the street. I'm like, wait a minute. So it's just the easiest way to capture, right? So we turn off technology. We're capturing, we're documenting strategy. So for many of you, this may be the first time that person, that client, you've extracted the process from their brain. It's been all in their head and they've never seen it. So now you've got it documented. You see the strategy, but you don't trust it. It's now here's where the marketing professional's job comes in. You just got the brain dump. And for you to craft this customer journey, you have to start identifying the areas that can be optimized, as well as the low hanging fruit, right? Because like you said, Barry, success isn't sexy, and the process is often boring and painful, right? So what we have to do is kind of like how you do your kids, is you say, hey, look, we're going to have this great big meal. Everything that you want on it's going to taste nice, good, and sweet. And then sneak in some vegetables on the side. Right?
Yeah.
Sneak in the good stuff. That's what you have to do with entrepreneurs a lot of times that aren't willing to go through the process. There are some that are, but you have to give them that quick win while you're still cleaning up the strategy and building out the customer journey. So what I like to do is, after I've extracted the strategy, I like to provide them with a quick win, wet their whistle, give them something to be like, hey, it's already working, and buy time to really create the customer journey. And you ask the tools, the main tool I was thinking about this, Barry, ever since you sent me the email. Is there another tool that I use? And the only other option of this tool would be like on paper. Maybe I would draw it on paper. But I like to go after I've got it written on paper. So there's actually 2 steps on paper. I write it down on paper. And when I say write it down, it's like bullet points, boxes, and arrows. So it is not like I'm writing. You won't be able to read it, but you'll be able to comprehend it because there's arrows everywhere and shapes and all of that. So then what I'll do is I'll usually take that and clean it up on paper if so. But I've gotten so good at taking my notes that I can just go straight from paper into the computer, and I'm firing up Lucidchart, man. At the point of this recording, it is the best flowchart software that I've used. I have been approached by some potential builders of new, so that may change going forward. But I'm in Lucidchart. I am in Lucidchart trying to digitize this thing, because what is the digital representation of the strategy that you just extracted? It's a blueprint.
Yeah, for sure.
It is the blueprint, right? So if any of you are thinking, what does Barry mean by a blueprint? It's that it's the visual representation of what needs to be implemented. So when we're talking about marketing and sales.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I think you're exactly right. I'm a big fan of the Moleskin notebook as well. I think tools, when you're in that capture process and the brainstorming process, tools get in the way of that creative process because
Absolutely.
you have to interrupt your mind, your mindset or your train of thought and go, oh, what icon do I need here, or what menu is that
Yes.
control on, and that just breaks your train of thought. Whereas you can vomit it all out in a stream of consciousness onto a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And you're right; it doesn't have to be anything onerous. It's bullet points, boxes, squares, customer flows, and then you can put that into a tool. The downside of the Moleskin notebook is it's hard to share, right?
Right.
And it's hard to keep for posterity. Like you said, I got about 40 in the drawer next to my desk here, and if I'm looking for some idea I had 3 years ago, it's kind of hard to find. But
Yeah.
and hard to share with a customer or client. So you need to put it into something eventually. But I can't. I found it best not to interrupt the process while it's happening and just write it down either on a piece, either in the notebook or on a whiteboard if I'm trying to get a customer to visualize something. But if you want to think about a metaphor that anyone can understand, say you want to build a new house, you would sit down with your builder or your architect, and they would ask you a bunch of questions. Well, how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
Is a big yard a priority? How many bedrooms do you need? What's your lifestyle like? Do you want a big bedrooms, small bedrooms? Do you want a big open plan living space or lots of different rooms? How much storage do you need? Somebody would ask those extraction kind of questions. And then the builder's going to go away and draw a floor plan or blueprint and come back and say, look, this is what you told me you want. Is everybody cool with that? And you might go, oh no, I'd rather have the back deck around the side or whatever. And then you can make some changes before. And then we can start talking about building something, right?
Yeah.
And if you have to switch builders midstream, or you switch employees, or you switch consultants, or whatever, you still have that documentation that everybody can go back to, and everybody can go, look, this is what we started to build, so let's finish building that, or let's pivot and make some changes, but let's make sure that everyone's working off the same page.
Yeah, Barry, could you imagine if a builder gave you what they were going to do in like a written document form?
Yeah, bullet points, some couple of bullet points. We're going to have bedrooms and we're going to have a roof.
Right. And even if it was accurate, like, hey, your bedroom is going to be this, it's going to be to the west of the master bedroom. The master bedroom will be this dimension with the windows facing the west end. It could be as accurate as possible. But the reason why it's not presented in that
like
form,
40-page Word document,
right, is because it needs to be visual for everybody can understand visual. Everybody. Right? Like there's no question when you see two boxes, one is to the left and one is to the right. Yeah. And I can't stress, I'm so glad you brought that example up because I can't stress the reality that automation works best when it emulates manual behavior, human behavior. Automation works best when it emulates that. So if we want to build something, what do builders do in the human analog space? Yeah. They create the blueprint. From the blueprint, they get the materials and then they start building. So when we take that into the digital space, I'm creating the blueprint from the strategy and creating my flow chart. I'm then letting the strategy dictate the tools, which are my equipment, the equipment used, and then I'm building. Barry, I'm not being hard on people because I was that person as well. Technology can be like a drug. Like there needs to be a t-shirt. Technology is a hell of a drug, right? Because you can get started. You don't even need money most of the times, right? And you can get that quick high like you're doing something, so I get it. And I've fallen into that a lot of times. But as you get mature and you understand where success really comes from, you stop that.
Yeah.
You're like, look, I'll get to you technology in a minute. I just need to see what the strategy is telling me. And then once you have the strategy, go ahead.
I'm starting a new business. Look at my landing page template.
Stop it, Barry. I see it so and again, everybody. So I guess we should have prefaced this, Barry. But hey, listen, this is a judge-free zone. Anytime that I
Everyone's got it.
speak, I like to say that because I'm gonna hit a chord. You're gonna be doing something. I'm gonna mention something, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, that's me." Like, oh, I did that. Because we're speaking from experience, so no judgment. If you've been doing these wrong steps, for the lack of a better term, up until now, no harm, no foul. Just do better going forward now that you've heard how to do better.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we've extracted that process from the customer. We've tweaked it a little bit. And so how are we going to document that and present it back? So are you doing that with Lucidchart, you said?
Oh man, Barry, I've gotten so the best thing that could happen for me and also those whose ears I have and that I influence with my framework and my process is that since I've been removed, involuntarily removed from employment, I've had the opportunity to really fine tune my framework, and I believe firmly, and everybody just listen. Don't worry, I have ways to show you how to do this for my aspiring up and coming automation service providers. But I firmly believe, Barry, that documentation for systems and automated systems specifically should always be visual. Dare you ever give somebody a document that like clearly states in a robust form everything that's happening? I've tried this.
Yeah.
People will look at it. It will impress them. They won't read it.
It'll make them
And
feel good.
work. Exactly. Yes, Barry. It'll make them feel good. They'll be like, whoo, yes, this is everything. It's like a big instruction manual.
Yeah.
So I don't like to do it that way. What I like to do is emulate furniture. Right? When you have furniture, you have various diagrams that are showing you how to put this thing together. So my documentation lives in various visual forms. So the first one is there's various maps. Barry, I don't create just one map where it's just like all the logic is here. I have layers, and again, I've perfected this process over time, but I have like a top level map which shows every stage. It's almost like a funnel map that shows every stage, and it just shows like the entry points, the automations in that stage, and then the terminators. This is more so for me. So when I have to review something that's been implemented, I can quickly get up to speed and understand, oh, okay, yep, there's 5 steps to this one. Each step, okay, these automations go with this step and they're terminated by this. And if they're terminated and they don't proceed to the step below them, this is what happens. I can get all of that from this top level map, Barry, and its shapes and lines and all of that, right? I don't have to read much, right? Then the next one is the logic map. In each of those stages, now, what is the logic and decision making that's happening to make sure that they progress to the next one? I treat building out pathways in business, a lot of people call them funnels, as just like football. It should be forward progress by any means necessary. Any backwards process should be a penalty because of a penalty. Like you don't want to go backwards. Once they've crossed the 50-yard line, do not let them go back to the 40, right? So once they've crossed from, let's say, lead to MQL, you're never sending them lead information. You're
Right.
talking to them as an MQL until they move forward, right? So this is all in mind as I'm mapping it out. So we have the logic, and now I've got the top level, I've got the logic chart, then I have a messaging, a messaging map. So I've got the top level map, the logic map, then a messaging map that just shows all of the emails that are going out, the time frame and everything else. Because I don't like to mix messaging on the same map as my logic. Because
No,
it can just get messy, you know?
and that's going to change over time more than the process, right? If you
Absolutely.
find some messaging is less than optimal, it's not quite working, you're going to tweak that, so but the process might not necessarily change very much. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I have that, and there's a couple other maps, like a email timeline map, as well as a email sheet that connects to the timeline. It's a spreadsheet where it shows all the emails that are going out per audience and per stage, however the business needs to see it, so that you can see the customer journey. And here's what's amazing when I do this. So all of my documentation is visual. All of it is visual. So here's what's amazing. I just walked I walked a client through it because I was helping them get ready for implementation. And one of the things that I do is they had a traditional process. And whenever the deal or the opportunity is lost, I used a red box. and it was a bright red, Barry. Like you couldn't miss it. Almost like Facebook notification red. Right? It's like you can't not see that notification. And I created a Loom video and I delivered it to them so they can ask questions or whatnot. And then we had a call to wrap up everything. And what happened was they were like, "Why is there so much red, Chris? How do we get rid of the red?" And that's exactly what I wanted them to see, because this is your process. That red, it exemplifies every time there's a decision made that is not in your favor and you have no follow up. There's nothing. And all that red meant is if I overlaid that red transparently to their pipeline, it was all of the clogs in the pipeline. They were building so aspirationally, like everything was a yes. Yep, they'll do this, then this, then this. And when I started mapping it out and said, hey, the opposite of yes is no, right?
It happens sometimes too. Just go talk to your wife.
Right. Right. But I couldn't have told them that. But once they saw it, they told themselves that. And as experts and consultants and people who implement, that's the greatest thing, is when the client looks at your work and realizes they need to do better. You didn't say anything. We need to do something there.
So I kind of think about the decision points along the journey. There's yes, which is the one you're after most of the time, obviously. No, and not now. Like, so it's
that's a good
not
one.
a hard no from the customer, right? Or the lead. It's like, maybe just not now. It's like, now's not the right time, but it isn't a hard no. Like someone saying, no, I don't need this. I don't want it. Go away. Leave me alone. But it's like, yeah, maybe in 30 days or 90 days, that might be right for me. So how do you handle those not nows as opposed to the hard no's?
Barry, this is my first time hearing the not now, and I absolutely love it, man. I absolutely love it. The not now is what we're usually the broad term that's used is long-term nurture.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's normally like the broad stroke that people say, hey, make sure you have a long-term nurture for people who aren't ready to make a decision at that point. And I agree with that. Here's one thing that people overlook when we're talking about decision and branching logic, right? Every decision introduces a new segment, right? So
Right.
if we keep it simple to a webinar registration, right? Somebody registered for the webinar, yes, or they didn't. No. Those are two segments. Now, if I continue down the yes branch, attended, yes, attended, no. Now I've got two more segments. And sometimes the segment, there are so many segments because there's so many decisions. And I'm not saying you have to treat every segment differently. Some of them can be grouped, but it's important to identify every time you're making a decision to ask yourself, is this a new segment that I need to be marketing to differently? And a lot of people don't ask that question. Right. So, and let me take a quick tangent here on segmentation. It's another one of the maps that I create. And I believe segmentation should take place outside of the tool. I absolutely do, because the tool limits your creativity of what you want to happen. So I often talk to people and say, hey, what are the segments? And I'm going off of the decisions that I see on the flowchart that I've created. And some of those branches, some of those yes and no's, I'm like, hey, that's an important segment. We need to have some form of follow up in place for them. So I look at it as follow up first, then long term nurture. And a follow up, by default, everybody has a follow up for yes, right? Everybody's like, if they do this, they do this. They don't have the follow up for the no. And if the follow up for the no doesn't work, then you have the long term nurture to catch them. It's the big net. Yep.
All right. So you're documenting that in all, in Lucidchart for the most part. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a combination. I've got Lucidchart going at this point. Now that I'm full-fledged in here, Lucidchart, I've got Google Sheets. I may have probably introduced Airtable by this time. It's a collective suite of visualization software to show not just the visual process, but also the relationship between everything. And what I'm looking for, and it's only because I don't do implementation anymore. What I'm looking for is to make the implementer's job easy. That's the goal. I should it for all of you listening. Great documentation will make a zero look like a hero. And when I say zero to hero because it rhymes, but I by no means me. I don't mean that you are a zero listening to this. I'm just saying you don't have to be an expert. And the way that the reason why that's important is because once somebody has created some very strong documentation, it is such an aid to the business owner because now they're not on the line to go and vet for the best builder.
Yeah.
Like they just need somebody that is fluent enough in the tools. And on the other side, it gives that person confidence and experience that's implementing it. And that's why I do it this way, because I'm serving both markets, Barry. Excuse me. I'm thinking about the CEO. You may have been doing the marketing, but you shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Hats off to you for taking on ownership to grow your own business. And then I'm thinking of the implementer that needs to know how to do it right the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm solving both. I'm solving that problem with both in mind.
And are you providing that documentation directly to the client? You're handing that off to them and saying, "Here you go, washing your hands. See you later." Or are you keeping the master? Are you the keeper of the strategy at that point?
Yeah. And I won't lie to you all. I would love to say, "Hey, I hand it off. It's a clean handoff, and I'm done." But the reality is, I hand it off to them. They value it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen documentation like this. This is so clear. This is so easy to follow." But they also need implementation. So
Yeah.
I'll often connect them with implementation, or I'll provide like some oversight for their in-house implementer as they're building it out, so they can have access to me. Say, "Hey, is this right? Hey, does this look good?" But the goal is for them to have somebody internal to their business that's executing this for them day to day. You can't outsource marketing, and you definitely can't outsource automation.
Yeah,
So
for
please,
sure.
everybody, do not try. The goal of everything that I'm doing, all the programs and all the trainings that I have, is to produce more automation service providers in the space so that business owners can pick and bring them in their business and truly scale. That's really the only formula that works.
Now, here's the $1 million question. Anybody who's been doing this for 10 minutes quickly finds out how do you keep that strategy up to date with what's actually happening in the tools, and vice versa? Because
Yeah.
you create this beautiful strategy for someone, and you go, "Here it is," right? And
Yep.
they may actually build that verbatim and say, right, we've done all that. But then, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, whatever it is, someone goes, "Oh, if we just tweak this automation here,
Yep.
and it branches here
Yep.
instead of branching there," and now the two don't match. What's your
Yes.
experience with that?
Oh, Barry, discipline is the only answer I have for you. But I
Good man.
have this will help. This will help. And I believe you mentioned this earlier. We've talked so much, Barry. I can't remember if it was on this podcast
Or what's recorded and what hasn't been recorded.
right, right. But you mentioned reviewing things quarterly.
Yeah.
At a bare minimum, you should be reviewing quarterly. And the reason why I say you should have somebody a marketer in your business for the day to day is because that's their job. That's their job to catch. Oh, wait a minute. We're not sending this email 2 days apart anymore. It's 3 days. Let me update the documentation. It's their job. Now,
Yeah.
I mentor marketers. Like that's my body of work. And sometimes they need accountability. So I can ask that question on behalf of the CEO. Hey, is your documentation up to date? Because the easiest way to keep it up to date is to do it when you do it.
Yeah.
Like if I just did it in Active Campaign, let me go make sure my documentation is reflects that. If I just did it in Entreport, let me go make sure my documentation reflects that. And what you'll see, Barry, watch this. What you'll see is once you do it enough, it becomes muscle memory. You feel bad when you're just jumping in the tool and you don't have it documented elsewhere. And then the next step,
It's a dirty little secret you're trying to keep.
right? The next step is mastery, Barry. Here's where you've approached mastery. You don't even go in the tool first. You go
Oh,
straight to the documentation, update it, and then execute. And the reason why that is mastery and is so powerful because that is a scalable approach that if one day you are no longer the builder, that
Right.
process keeps working.
Yeah. And here's one thing that's a universal truth. In these kind of situations, especially when the enterprise gets a little bit bigger, there needs to be someone who's the owner of that document and whose
Yes.
ass gets kicked if it's not in order, right? Because
Yes.
if everyone owns it, then nobody owns it, and
That's it, man.
it's gonna become an antique, is what it's gonna become. So, you remember when we had a strategy document? Oh yeah, where's that? Right.
Yep.
So someone needs to own that, whether it's the marketer or the CEO or the manager, whatever. There needs to be a designated owner who's responsible for keeping that document current.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. Absolutely.
Now, we just spent about 35, 40 minutes talking about how you should not pay attention to the tools at all. Uh, but I've heard you talk about Airtable quite a lot, and I've never touched it. So, what's Airtable like? What's it for? This is just for me personally because I've never used it.
Yeah. Yeah. Airtable is spreadsheets. And if you think of Microsoft Excel and then Microsoft Access getting together, having a baby, that's
Right.
that's Airtable. It's the look of a spreadsheet and the functionality of a database. The reason why I use it and I love it is the relational database connection. So I can connect records and see how things are connected. And Barry, so let me preface this. I'm using Airtable in marketing in a way that the tool probably is not supposed to be used, and probably many other people don't use it. I think I've broken it in a good way, because it's like, how did you do that? Right. Which tends to be my thing. But here's the thing, Barry, it helps me make sure my marketing is consistent. So let me walk through an example. Like I'll have in an Airtable, how in a spreadsheet you can have multiple sheets within
Yes.
one spread master sheet. So you
Right.
can have multiple tables within an Airtable. So one table will be like for actions that I want to record in my CRM, and then another tab will be for segments. And what I'll do is I'll name all the segments that are in my in my application or whatnot. And then I'll link them to all of the actions that people can take to be put in that segment. So now when I click on the segment, Barry, it opens up like a record and I can see all the actions connected to it.
Oh, cool.
You see what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
a level of connectivity back and forth that allows me to say, oh, wait a minute, there's a hole. So I'm all about identifying the holes, right? No, if you know how to plug a hole, you're not intimidated by it, right? It's the
Right.
people that can't plug the hole. It's just like, hey, let's ignore it. Let's put a picture over that.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So that's Airtable. And then once you get good with it, I also use it for yearly, quarterly, and annual, quarterly, weekly, monthly planning, because you can link the year to the quarters, and then the quarters to the months, and the months to the weeks, and things like that. It gets very advanced. But yeah, absolutely love it, man. And it's such a good database of record. When I was at Active Campaign, I used a single Airtable to manage the production of the entire podcast, man. And it made it so easy. Everybody internally could easily access that and get the URL from any podcast, not have to go to the website and try to have to search through it. It was great, man. So I'm a strong Airtable advocate. I'll throw another tool out there that operates kind of like Airtable and OneNote in one that I've used a lot for internal documentation, and that's Notion, Notion. Nobody told me about. No, I think my friend Brandon told me about it. So I tend to use that a lot because you can mix a database and some notes like on the same sheet. So that's very interesting. So those are two that I'm using mainly for like internal tracking and database and organization functions.
Right. Cool. Yeah, and I use mind maps a lot as well. Like if I'm
Yes.
building out a flow, because you can kind of have yes no branching inside of that as well, and you can have links out to other documents that might have the copy for the email or the URL for the landing page
Yep.
or whatever, and it's easy to visualize, and you can put little I use MindMeister is the one I use kind of a lot, and you can put
Yeah.
little to do boxes on stuff and say, right, these are the 5 things we haven't done yet when it comes to implementation.
Love it.
Here's the URL for that. Here's the URL for here's the notes. Here's the goal that we're trying to accomplish with this step. And what we didn't really mention in a lot of this strategy and documentation stuff is when you go back, like 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months
Oh
from
my
now,
goodness.
and you're
Yes.
just in the tool, like no one's done the strategy stuff, and you're just in the tool and no one's documented the strategy, good luck. Good luck, mate.
Good luck.
Um, good luck
Good luck.
figuring out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because either they build, they try and build one monster Franken automation that's got a gazillion steps in it,
Yep.
and you can't see the whole thing on a single page,
Yep.
and you're trying to conceptualize what this automation was meant to do in the first place. Or they've done the way that I prefer is they have modular automations that hand off to each other, which are easier to maintain and easier to report on.
That's it.
But you don't have the mind map of all the, you're looking at one of the automations and there's 10 more in this kind of sequence. And you're like, all right, where are the other 9 related ones? So, and what's the goal? What's the overall goal of all of these things as well? So, even if it's just you, I would stress having some sort of documentation plan, because 6 months or 9 months later, you are going to regret it not having one. I guarantee it. I've been going through one of my old accounts recently since I'm in lockdown like everybody else. And I'm just looking at this going, wow, I have no idea what I was thinking when I put this together.
Yes.
Right.
And you know what? That's a good you know what, Barry? Let's pause and let everybody know that we are not far from them, because I was doing the same thing today. I was going through my custom fields, and I had realized that I had created all the custom fields in my account at a time where I didn't have a framework for documenting custom fields before I created them. And I was like, wow. First off, I didn't remember what half of these were used for.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, just think about this. Any application, I haven't seen one CRM that the custom field next to it, it has any annotation or
any notes
anything.
yeah.
Nothing. And then if you take it a step forward, you don't know where that field is being used. Is it being used in automations? Does it link to something? Does it trigger something? You don't have that level of visibility in any tool. However, I can build that level of visibility in my documentation.
Yeah, or you open up an automation that started with a tag. Customer gets tag X, and you're like, where the F is tag X coming from? Like you cannot find where that tag is being applied. It could be as a subset of or a sub function of some form, or it could be from a landing page or some API call. And you're like, where is this tag coming from?
Yeah. So interlinking features and data sets within an application is what's hugely missing in the space itself. Now, I will say that ActiveCampaign and Entreport are leading in that case. Entreport, there's a lot of ways that I can click something and go to a place, and then it brings me back. So you can kind of like get around to it. ActiveCampaign does the same thing. But overall, I'm not waiting on these platforms to get that right, because I can create it right now in my documentation and have everything linked up.
Yeah, and another important point is, if the time ever comes where you want to change platforms,
there you go.
Your strategy is not embedded inside somebody else's platform, and you can pick that blueprint up and take it to a different builder, and they can build you the same house, on a different lot, in a different location, in a different town, right?
So good.
So don't create your own handcuffs, people.
Yes.
You want to have as Chris said in the very beginning, you want to have your strategy and your documentation independent of your tool. I think if you take one lesson away, that's the one to take away.
Yeah, I call it platform imprisonment. There's no need to put the handcuffs on yourself, like Barry said, and walk into the prison. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that.
And you know what? Sitting around the boardrooms in the strategy of all these software tools, they're trying to figure out exactly how to do that.
That's exactly.
How can we lock these people in? What's our churn rate now, and how can we lock them in a little bit further? HubSpot is the leader at that, right? Once you're in HubSpot,
man,
you might as well just call it a day, because you never get there.
Yeah, they get you. They're free. Their free comes with a hefty price tag later.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Let's quick review to wrap it up. All right, so. For those people who have never done this strategy journey before, I think we start with, as you said, people, process, and product. Who is the market for this? What is the product you're trying to sell them, and what's the process that we're going to put in place to get them to buy that product or service? And we didn't really talk about it but it's been talked about a lot. You want to try and have some minimum viable product to find out if everybody wants it before you spend too much time building out the rest of this stuff. And then we're going to begin with the end in mind. What's the customer journey we want to take these people on? And we've already found out with that minimum viable product whether they want to kind of go on that journey or not. And then Chris talked about his 5 fundamental steps. Do you want to just quickly review those, Chris?
Yeah, that's how are you generating traffic to your business? How are you capturing that traffic? Once you have that information, how are you following up with them? In your follow up, how are you driving them to that sales event where you're going to make the offer? Once you make the offer, how are you taking the money? How are you making that offer and taking the money? How are you converting them to a customer? And then how are you delivering that product?
Right. Awesome. And then we talked about, the initial documentation, and that we both prefer just the straight up Moleskine notebook just because they're cool and they feel nice. If you've never seen one, I urge you to go out and grab one and play around with it. And I'm a firm believer that any kind of software tool in this initial process just stifles your creativity and stifles the flow of ideas. So for me and for Chris both, we like to get it out on a notebook, bullet points, squares, boxes, arrows, flows. Secondarily, maybe a whiteboard if we need to get customers to visualize something with us as we're talking about it. And then we document all that before we even break open a single tool. But at some point, you're going to have to document that so you can give it back to your client or your customer, or have it for yourself for future reference. So we talked about a few tools in there like Lucidchart and Airtable, Notion, MindMeister, any mind mapping tool, Google Docs for, writing copy and that kind of stuff.
One other one that's come up a lot, Barry, that I didn't mention is Miro. It used to be called what is it? I forgot the name of it already. MIRO, a real-time board. It used to be called real-time board. I know a lot of people are using Miro now. But
Okay, cool. I'll have to check that out. Real-time board. And then you want to make sure that once that documentation is in place, everybody agrees on what the blueprint looks like before the bulldozers show up and start churning the ground to build your house, right?
Yes.
When the house is halfway built, it's the wrong time to say, "Oh no, we wanted it near the back of the lot, not the front of the lot." Right. So once everyone's agreed on the strategy, then that strategy document becomes a living document or a living documentation that somebody needs to be responsible for, so that it doesn't instantly become out of date 2 days after you create it. And it's something you should refer back to all the time for your customer journey and for what you're trying to build and for what you have built. And if you make a change in the tool, go back and change that document. And then lastly, that owner should be doing periodical reviews once a quarter, or once every 6 months to make sure, because hey, the market changes, right? That customer journey may change. Like the market dramatically changed in the last 2 weeks. Is your marketing still keeping up? I saw some Facebook ads just yesterday for some guy who's running webinars on how to be skills to be a public speaker, and I'm like, I don't know if there's a lot of public speaking going on at the moment. Right. So you want to review that marketing and that customer journey on a regular basis because the market can change, the customer can change, lots can change. Did we miss anything, Chris? Any parting words we want to throw in there?
That's great. That's a great comprehensive wrap up. Just highlighting documentation. Please just document it when you do it. That's just if you practice that, it is the best practice that you can have. It is your insurance and your security as an upcoming expert in the automation space that you all are. Please document it when you do it.
And the one major takeaway is hit the record button. All right, brother. If someone wants to reach out to you, get involved with you, have you helped them with strategy, where's the best place they can do that?
Yeah, Automation Bridge is my website, everybody, automationbridge.com, and you can access all of the resources that I have. If you want to just get started with engagement marketing, it's just kind of like the entry point into marketing. I've got a quick crash course that you can go through, learn how to capture leads and engage with them immediately. I'll make that available to you all at automationbridge.com/Barry.
All right. And we'll put that in the show notes for this episode over at theactivemarketer.com and just click on the podcast links. All right, my friend. Always great to talk to you. Always enjoy it. You're always a breath of fresh air in the marketing space. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom, and keep safe.
Thank you, Barry. You do the same. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to the Active Marketer Podcast. You can find the show notes and all the latest marketing automation news over at theactivemarketer.com.
Boom, and clear.
We got it. It took us 2 days and 8 tries.
Hey, man.
We got it.
Nothing good happens on the first go, right?
That's it, man.
Zombies have not destroyed the podcast.
They tried.